I'm Craig, 33 years old, and if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in the back row of my own brother's wedding as an uninvited guest, sipping mediocre champagne while watching my family pretend I didn't exist, I probably would have laughed. My brother and I were close once. Not in the best friend kind of way, but in the quietly dependable sense. We didn't talk every day, but he always had my back. Or at least, I thought he did. Our family's not exactly rich, but we're not scraping by either. We grew up middle class in a quiet suburb, the kind of place where people mow their lawns at the same time every Sunday and argue over holiday lights in the HOA group chat. Our parents were the hard-working type, mom a nurse, dad a small business owner, and they raised us to believe in keeping our heads down, doing our work, and showing up for family. I took that to heart more than most, I think. Maybe too much. For most of my life, I was the quiet one in the family. Not shy, just more observant. While my brother Matt was the golden child, charismatic, athletic, always the center of attention, I was the one who people forgot to include in group photos. It never really bothered me. I had my own goals, my own path. I studied finance, worked long hours, took risks. The kind of stuff nobody really notices until it pays off. And recently, it did. I'd spent the better part of the last 5 years building a small investment firm from the ground up. Nothing flashy, just smart, patient moves. A few angel investments here and there, a well-timed acquisition, and suddenly I wasn't just Craig the accountant. I was Craig, the guy with real leverage. But no one in my family really knew that. Not because I was keeping secrets, but because they never asked. I learned early on that when I brought up my work, eyes glazed over. It wasn't flashy like Matt's job in marketing, and it didn't come with viral LinkedIn posts or destination conferences. My parents thought I still did tax stuff, and I didn't bother correcting them. What did it matter? Everything changed when Matt got engaged to Jasmine. Now, Jasmine, she's a presence. The kind of person who fills a room the moment she walks in, and not always in a good way. Think reality TV energy wrapped in a layer of passive-aggressive comments. She's beautiful, I'll give her that, tall, poised, with this effortless elegance that makes everyone else feel like they're trying too hard. But behind that smile is someone who's very, very aware of social status. And once the engagement was official, it became clear that Jasmine saw Matt's family as something she needed to fix. I remember the first time I met her. It was a Sunday brunch at my parents' place, casual, jeans and t-shirts kind of day. Jasmine showed up in a dress that looked like it belonged at a charity gala, wearing designer sunglasses indoors and holding a tiny dog in a purse. She hugged my mom like she was a child she'd just met at a country club. When she got to me, she blinked, smiled politely, and said, "Oh, you're Matt's brother." That was it. Not "nice to meet you." Not "I've heard so much." Just a polite nod and a clear dismissal. From that moment on, I was invisible to her. And slowly, that invisibility started to spread. Family dinners turned into couples' nights, where I was the odd one out. Group chats about wedding planning were accidentally sent without me. And every time I showed up to something, Jasmine would give me that same polite smile, like I was a piece of furniture she couldn't quite move out of the room. It was subtle at first. Little things. A backhanded compliment here. A missed invite there. But it built up. The first real blow came during one of the wedding planning meetings at my parents' house. Jasmine was talking about photo aesthetics, how she wanted the pictures to feel elevated, timeless, like a Vogue editorial. She pulled out a mood board with smiling models and opulent venues and turned to me, saying, "No offense, Craig, but you probably wouldn't be comfortable in this kind of setting. It's very curated." I blinked. What does that mean? "Oh, nothing," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Just that the style's a bit upscale. I wouldn't want you to feel out of place." Matt didn't say anything, just sat there, eyes down, like maybe he agreed. That night, I went home and stared at my phone for 20 minutes, debating whether to text him, ask what that was about. But I didn't. I let it slide. Again, another week went by, and I got the official wedding invite in the mail. Except, there was no +1. No seating assignment. Just a generic card. Everyone else in the family got the full suite. Names engraved, RSVP cards, custom wax seals. Mine looked like a backup they printed at Staples. It stung more than I expected. Still, I showed up for the engagement party. Wore a nice suit, kept a smile on my face, made polite conversation. But Jasmine made a point of introducing me last every time. "This is Craig," she'd say. as if struggling to remember my name. Matt's brother. And then she'd pivot right back to someone more important. The final insult came 3 weeks before the wedding. It was a Tuesday. I was at work, in the middle of reviewing a contract, when I got a text from Matt. "Hey, can we talk?" I called him immediately, assuming something was wrong. He answered, voice tight. "Hey man. So, Jasmine's been thinking a lot about the guest list." I felt my stomach tighten. Okay. She's just worried about optics, you know? Her family's flying in from all over. They're high profile. A lot of important people. She doesn't want anything to feel off. Off. I repeated. Yeah. It's just, he hesitated. She thinks maybe it's best if you skip the wedding photos. Maybe even the ceremony. Just come to the after party. Less pressure that way. I couldn't speak for a second. It felt like someone had shoved all the air out of the room. "So I'm good enough for the after party?" I finally said. "Just not the part where people might see me?" "It's not like that," Matt said quickly. She thinks you might not fit the image she's going for." The image. That word stuck in my head like a thorn. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just said, "Noted," and hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, just staring at my office window. Not because I was sad, but because something in me had shifted. All these years I tried to stay quiet, be the bigger person, let things slide. I kept my success to myself because I didn't need validation. But in that moment, I realized something. Jasmine had no idea who she was dismissing, and neither did Matt. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd finalized a deal to become the majority shareholder of a luxury travel conglomerate that happened to own one of the companies Jasmine's father chaired. A quiet acquisition, through a holding group. Nothing flashy, but enough that I now had a seat at the table. A very important seat. And suddenly, I wasn't just Matt's awkward older brother. I was someone Jasmine's entire family had a very real reason to notice. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because if they wanted me invisible, I was happy to let them pretend. Right up until the moment they realized just how big of a mistake that was. And that moment? That came at the wedding reception. I didn't respond to Matt's text after that call. I didn't show any emotion. No follow-up, no snide remark. Just radio silence. And that silence was apparently taken as agreement, because I didn't hear from him for a week, until our mom called. She didn't know the full story, of course. She never really did. She had this way of glossing over things, pretending everything was fine as long as the family showed up for Sunday dinner. "Craig," she said, voice chipper. "Jasmine's finalizing the head count for the wedding dinner. You're still coming to the reception, right?" I didn't know what to say to that. My throat tightened with something that wasn't quite anger, but definitely wasn't peace. "I'm not going to the ceremony," I said. "Apparently, I don't fit the aesthetic." Mom let out a short, confused laugh. "What? Who told you that?" "Matt." There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, carefully, "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." "It's not," I said. "He said Jasmine doesn't want me in the photos. Doesn't want me around her family." "That can't be right," she said. But her voice had already gone soft. I could tell she knew, or at least suspected. "Maybe you should call him again. Try to talk it out." I didn't, because there was nothing left to say. The next 2 weeks passed like a bad fever. I tried to stay focused on work. There were contracts to sign, a merger to finalize, meetings to lead, but my mind kept drifting back to Matt and Jasmine. Every now and then I'd get a forwarded message from the family group chat, pictures of floral arrangements, venue sneak peeks, dress fittings. Jasmine smiling, Matt standing beside her, beaming like he'd won the lottery. My name never came up. Not once. One night, I scrolled through the chat and noticed a photo Jasmine had posted. A seating chart preview, handwritten with calligraphy. I zoomed in. My name wasn't there. I texted Matt. "So I'm not even getting a seat at dinner?" He replied 10 minutes later. "It's not that. Jasmine just didn't think it made sense to include you for formal dinner. You can still join for drinks after." I didn't respond. And that was the moment it all snapped. Not just because I was excluded, but because I realized I'd spent years being the dependable one. The one who never caused drama, never demanded anything. The one who was easy to ignore. And this was how they saw me. Not just Jasmine, but Matt too. Disposable. Embarrassing. Unworthy of a chair at his wedding. I started remembering things I hadn't let myself feel at the time. Like how, growing up, Matt always got the new stuff while I wore his hand-me-downs. How he crashed my car when he was 19 and our parents made me cover the deductible because I had savings. How I helped him move apartments in college during a rainstorm, dragging a mattress 3 blocks because he didn't book a truck, and he never even said thank you. I remembered how he missed my graduation because he forgot the date, but I still drove 3 hours to attend his. How I lent him $5,000 during his first year working because he said he was drowning in bills. Money he never paid back, and I never brought up. Because that's what brothers do, right? They forgive. They show up. They give grace. But this was different. This wasn't just Matt being careless. This was deliberate erasure. And it was Jasmine orchestrating it all, with Matt playing the obedient puppet. And the part that made it worse? They thought they were getting away with it. See, there's something surreal about being cut out by people who think they're better than you, while also owning a majority share in the company that signs their paychecks. Because Jasmine's dad, William Langston, is the chairman of a luxury hospitality conglomerate called Varello International. Think upscale resorts, executive jets, private events. And about 2 months before all this wedding drama began, Varello's board had been in chaos, mismanagement, internal disputes, investor pullouts. My firm had swooped in and bought 22% of their outstanding shares through a partner fund, another 9% through a shell acquisition. Quiet moves, silent capital. I wasn't the face of the transaction. I didn't need to be. But by the time Jasmine was texting florists and trying on designer shoes, I owned 51%. And William had no idea. Until one rainy Friday afternoon, when I was invited, anonymously, into a board meeting. I'll never forget his face when he walked into that room. He was tall, sharp-jawed, wearing a navy pinstripe suit like he was born in it. He scanned the boardroom, eyes passing right over me like I was a consultant waiting to refill his coffee. Then the meeting started. I let the legal counsel run through the introductions. I said nothing. I just waited. When my name was finally brought up as the new controlling interest, William turned his head slowly, and for the first time, actually looked at me. I smiled. He did not. After the meeting, he approached me. "Craig, was it? You're Matt's brother?" I nodded. Small world. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You've been busy." Quietly. His jaw flexed. "What are your intentions here?" I tilted my head. "That depends." "On what?" I let the silence stretch for just a second longer than was comfortable. "On whether Jasmine ever apologizes for saying I wasn't good enough to be in her wedding photos." He blinked. The air changed. "That was her decision," he said eventually, carefully. "I know, and I respect it." He looked uneasy, like he didn't know what game I was playing. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I just handed him my card, my real card, the one with my name as managing partner, and walked away. For the next few days, things were quiet, until my mother called again. She was softer this time, almost timid. "Craig, Jasmine mentioned you might be thinking of showing up to the reception." I wasn't invited to the ceremony. "Or the dinner," I said. "But yes, I'll be there. Wouldn't want to miss the drinks, right?" She hesitated. "Craig, she's worried." "About what?" "About you causing a scene." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "You mean like standing in the background of a photo and ruining her aesthetic?" "She didn't mean it like that," she said, automatically. I waited. She sighed. "Okay, maybe she did." There it was. "Mom," I said, "I'm not going to cause a scene." She sounded relieved. "Good. That's good. But I will be seen." The call ended soon after that, and I could feel the ripple starting. A few days before the wedding, I got a call from William Langston. Not a board call. A personal one. He didn't say hello. Just, "Craig, let's talk." I listened. He tried to be civil at first. Tried to pretend we were equals, just two men having a conversation. But the desperation bled through. He asked if I was really planning to attend. If I would be making any announcements. If I could just be discreet. "I was told I'm not welcome at the ceremony," I said. "So I'll be at the reception." Quietly. Professionally. He didn't like that answer. He tried a new tactic. Asked if I'd consider selling my shares. "We'd make it worth your time," he said. "It's not personal." I smiled into the receiver. "That's the thing," I said. "It is personal." He hung up. And so, the day of the wedding came. The ceremony was held at some grand estate outside the city. White marble pillars, manicured hedges, a string quartet playing under a silk canopy. I didn't go. I sat in my car, parked just out of view, watching the guests arrive. Everyone was dressed like royalty. Jasmine's family in designer dresses, tailored tuxedos, laughter that sounded expensive. My own parents looked stiff, unsure of where they fit in all this. And then, finally, Matt and Jasmine appeared. Smiling, glowing, oblivious. They didn't know I was there. Not yet. Not until the reception. Not until I walked in, wearing a custom-tailored black suit that cost more than Jasmine's gown. Confident, uninvited, unapologetic. And when I made my way toward them, champagne in hand, smile sharp as a blade, that's when everything started to unravel. The ballroom looked like a scene ripped from a billionaire's wedding catalog. Gleaming chandeliers, crystal flutes catching the light just right, fresh orchids spilling from centerpieces that probably cost more than my parents' monthly mortgage. Every detail screamed status. And every detail, I knew, had been curated to impress Jasmine's family. Her father's boardroom acquaintances, fashion world cousins, high society friends. And now me, the uninvited guest, the nobody brother. I walked in just as the newlyweds made their second entrance. This time as Mr. and Mrs. Langston Sheffield, their hyphenated name broadcast by the MC with such pomp you'd think royalty had arrived. Everyone applauded. Jasmine did her slow-motion twirl. Matt waved like a campaign winner, and they took their places at the long, elevated wedding table flanked by gold-rimmed plates and ivory menus. I didn't expect anyone to notice me, but someone did. A ripple started somewhere near the bar. A few heads turned, then more. I didn't say a word, just moved with quiet certainty to an empty corner, where a waiter, probably assuming I was a guest, offered me a glass of champagne. I took it. Matt saw me first. From across the ballroom, mid-laugh with one of Jasmine's cousins, his gaze locked with mine. His smile faltered. For a second, I could see him mentally replaying every decision that led to this moment. I raised my glass in a quiet salute. He didn't return it. I stayed in the shadows for a while, long enough to watch how they paraded their new image. How Jasmine clung to her father's arm when introducing him to guests. How Matt, once the laid-back older brother who used to make fun of yacht clubs and monogram towels, now laughed just a little too loudly at elitist jokes. I watched as my parents sat stiffly at the edge of the main table, clearly out of place, while Jasmine's family swarmed the room like they owned it. I felt alone in a room full of people I once called family. And for a brief moment, just a flicker, I almost walked out. I'm not ashamed to admit that I felt that pit in my stomach again. That sting of rejection that no amount of money or power seems to numb. The voice in your head that whispers, "See? You're not one of them. You never were." But then I caught sight of someone I didn't expect to see. My Aunt Marlene, my dad's sister. A fiery woman in her 60s who wore oversized glasses, chain-smoked like a French film director, and didn't believe in mincing words. She hadn't been around for most of the wedding festivities, lived out of state, had some kind of falling out years ago. But there she was, seated at a back table, her hair tied in a red scarf, watching everything with narrowed eyes. She spotted me, raised her glass, and mouthed, "You don't belong here." I smiled. For a second, I thought she meant it the same way Jasmine had. But then she nodded to the newlyweds, curled her lip in distaste, and mouthed again, "They don't know who you are." And that was the turning point. Not the public moment of revenge I'd been planning. Not some grand corporate reveal. Just that look. That silent confirmation that someone still saw me. Still knew me. Still remembered I wasn't always the background character. I nodded back, finished my champagne, and decided that tonight wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. I didn't need to interrupt their night to feel powerful. I didn't need to embarrass them in front of their polished guests. Because I'd already won. Quietly. Elegantly. Strategically. But before I tell you what I did do, let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. Because none of this was overnight. Rebuilding myself, that took time. The lowest point wasn't that phone call from Matt. It wasn't even seeing my name omitted from the wedding chart. The worst moment, the real bottom, came 3 days after that board meeting with Jasmine's dad. After the silence. After the call from my mom. After the realization that I'd been written out of my own brother's life, like a character from a show who no longer fit the plot. It was a Tuesday. I'd taken the afternoon off under the excuse of back-to-back meetings, but the truth was I couldn't focus. I walked out of my high-rise office, past the marble lobby with its glass sculpture centerpiece, and just wandered. Down unfamiliar blocks, through quiet parks, past bustling cafes where people laughed and clinked glasses. I wasn't part of anything that day. Not the city, not my family, not the wedding. Eventually, I sat on a bench facing the river. Cold wind brushing my coat collar. Watching the water move, slow and murky. I stared at it for a long time and asked myself, what's the point of any of this? What was the point of building something from scratch? Of pouring every waking hour into something real, only to be erased when it mattered most? I didn't cry, but I did feel hollow. Like everything I'd done had led to a place where I was still, somehow, invisible. That night, I didn't go home. I booked a room at a boutique hotel I liked. Nothing extravagant, just quiet. Ordered room service. Put my phone on silent. And opened my laptop, not to answer emails, but to write something I hadn't written in years. A list of everything I'd built. Every deal. Every share. Every risk that paid off. And then, in another column, a list of everything I had allowed. Every time I'd been disrespected and said nothing. Every time I'd made myself small to keep the peace. Every time I'd let my brother walk away with more credit, more attention, more space. And when I looked at those lists side by side, something inside me shifted. I realized that my success had never been about being seen. It had been about proving something. To them. To myself. And that was the problem. Because the minute you build something just to prove you're worth loving, you hand all the power back to the people who refuse to see you. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and decided I wasn't doing that anymore. I wouldn't beg for a seat at anyone's table. I'd build my own table, with better lighting. Over the next few weeks, everything about my life stayed the same on the outside, but on the inside, I was sharpening. I got serious about taking care of myself, not out of vanity, but because I was tired of being dismissed. I hired a personal trainer, got a custom wardrobe, not flashy, but fitted, clean lines, understated wealth. I stopped wearing the slightly oversized suits that made me look like a math teacher at a funeral. I started networking again, not just business circles, but art galleries, philanthropic events, industry panels. I leaned into the power I already had, the empire I'd built while playing the background. And something surprising started to happen. People noticed. Doors opened. Conversations flowed. A partner at a major media firm reached out after seeing one of our investment projects. A political strategist asked if I'd ever considered joining a civic board. Even William Langston's executive assistant began responding to my emails with slightly more urgency. The world started treating me the way I had quietly wished my family would. And with every new meeting, every closed deal, every nod of recognition, I started letting go of the pain. Not forgiving, necessarily, but loosening my grip on it. It no longer controlled me. And when the wedding date finally rolled around, I was no longer the brother on the sidelines hoping to be invited in. I was the man whose absence would be noticed, which made my arrival even more powerful. So when I stepped into that ballroom, it wasn't to prove a point. It was a quiet declaration. You can ignore someone for years, diminish them, dismiss them, but you don't get to erase them from your story and expect silence, especially when they're holding the pen. And now, as I stood at the edge of the reception floor, one final glass of champagne in hand, I watched as Jasmine whispered something to Matt, her face suddenly tense, eyes darting toward me. He turned, pale and tight-lipped. I waited, because the moment was coming. Not the climax. Not yet. But the tremor. The crack in the mirror. Matt's eyes followed me as I walked through the reception like I belonged there. Which, technically, I didn't. But that didn't matter. I wasn't here as a guest. I wasn't even here as a brother. I was here as the mirror they'd tried to avoid. Jasmine noticed me seconds after Matt did. She was mid-toast with one of her diamond-draped aunts when her eyes flicked toward me. I saw the instant panic. Her mouth froze on a smile that didn't finish. Then she leaned into Matt, whispering urgently. Matt glanced again, as if he needed to confirm I was still there. And I was. Calm. Composed. Quietly sipping champagne from a glass that probably cost more than the suit I used to wear to family Thanksgivings. They didn't move right away. Maybe they were hoping I'd walk out on my own. That I'd seen enough, felt ashamed enough, to slip back into the shadows I apparently belonged to. But this wasn't that story. I wasn't the invisible brother anymore. And I wasn't going anywhere. A few minutes later, I saw Matt heading toward me. Not with the usual smile, or even that stiff, fake brotherly warmth he'd worn at the last couple of family events. He looked cautious, like someone approaching a loose wire and praying it wasn't live. "Craig," he said, hands in his pockets. "You're here." "Sharp observation," I said, casually sipping. "Congratulations, by the way. Beautiful ceremony." From what I heard. He glanced around, lowering his voice. I thought we talked about this. You told me I wasn't welcome at the ceremony, I said. You said Jasmine didn't want me in the pictures. He looked uncomfortable. Yeah, but we agreed. No, I interrupted. You decided. I stayed quiet. Matt looked over his shoulder, probably checking if Jasmine was watching. She was. I could see her pretending not to be, her attention locked on a conversation she clearly wasn't following. You've got to understand, man, Matt said. This wedding, her family's huge. There's press. Photos. Her dad's business people. She just wanted it to look a certain way. I smiled. Yeah, I get that. He sighed in relief. But what she doesn't know, I added, is that I own that business. His smile froze. Come again. I stepped in slightly closer, not enough to cause a scene, just enough for the words to be for him and him alone. Varello International. Your father-in-law's crown jewel. I'm the majority shareholder now. Matt blinked like I'd just spoken another language. No, you're not. You're joking. You sure? I raised an eyebrow. Because I was at the last board meeting. Sat across from William Langston himself. He didn't look thrilled. Matt's face went pale. He didn't say anything for several long beats. I let the silence thicken. Let the reality sink in. Let it sting. Then I patted his shoulder. You've got a lovely evening ahead. Enjoy it. And I walked away. But that wasn't the revenge. Not yet. That moment, that was the seed. What came next was the harvest. After that reception, I knew two things for certain. Jasmine's family valued image more than integrity, and my brother had lost his backbone somewhere between proposal and honeymoon planning. I could have gone nuclear right then. Made a toast. Revealed everything. Public humiliation, front and center. But I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted consequences. So I started digging deeper. You'd be surprised how many layers sit between a wealthy family's image and their reality. And Jasmine's family? They were a house of cards disguised as a castle. Her father, William Langston, had positioned himself as a titan in luxury hospitality, but his empire was fraying at the edges. Debt hidden behind shell companies. Lawsuits buried in quiet settlements. Executive reshuffles every 6 months. And now, thanks to a few timely acquisitions, I held the strings. But it wasn't just about power. It was about control. So I called a few people. Old colleagues. Industry insiders. A journalist I'd helped once who owed me a favor. And a compliance investigator I knew through a quiet deal we'd done for a merger audit. I didn't even have to ask for dirt. It came to me. Turns out, Jasmine's father had been pushing for a new executive contract. One that would consolidate his power on the board and secure his daughter's future position as head of a charity initiative under the Varello brand. A vanity title. No responsibilities. Just optics. Nepotism dressed in pearls. So I blocked it. Quietly. Legally. The board never even had to vote. I simply leveraged my control clause to halt non-urgent structural expansions pending fiscal stabilization. Corporate speak for, not on my watch. A week later, William called me again. This time he didn't ask. He demanded a meeting. I agreed. We met at a private club downtown. He arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by 2 assistants and reeking of expensive scotch. I was already seated, coffee in hand, files spread neatly before me. Craig, he said, not bothering to shake my hand. This has gone far enough. Has it? I asked, without looking up. You're interfering in company business for personal reasons. I'm protecting shareholder value, I replied smoothly, which happens to be my responsibility, not funding wedding favors in the form of executive titles for relatives. William sat down slowly, eyes sharp. Is this about Jasmine? This is about respect, I said. Something your daughter and your son-in-law forgot about. He leaned in. You think this boardroom power play will make them regret not inviting you to a few photos? I smiled. Oh, I'm not here for regret. Then what are you here for? I closed the folder. Legacy. He stared at me, trying to read between the lines. But there was nothing there to find. I stood up, buttoned my jacket. This isn't personal, William. This is business. And your family brought business to my doorstep when they made it personal. I left him sitting there, seething. But I wasn't done. Because revenge isn't just about cutting someone down. It's about reclaiming your place. So I went back to my family. Not to grovel. Not to beg for a seat. To reintroduce myself. I started with Aunt Marlene. I called her, thanked her for that look she gave me at the reception. We talked for hours. She told me things I never knew, about how my dad used to lean on me to keep peace, how Matt had always been protected, even when he didn't deserve it. She told me about my mom's worry, the silence that followed every argument, the way she swept everything under the rug for the family's sake. And I told her everything. The company, the power, the betrayal. Marlene, true to form, didn't gasp, didn't say, "Oh, honey." She just said, "It's about time someone shook the tree." After that, things moved fast. She helped me reconnect with a few family members who'd been distant by design. Cousins who were tired of the Matt and Jasmine show. Uncles who'd been quietly excluded from certain events. Even my mom, who called me late one night, voice soft and unsure. "I didn't know," she said. "You didn't ask." I replied, not unkindly. "You're right." That meant more than I expected. And little by little, the family dynamic shifted. Not all at once. Not with fireworks. But in subtle, powerful ways. Like when a cousin invited me to a reunion without adding, "I don't know if Jasmine would be okay with it." Or when my mom stopped making excuses for Matt and started saying, "That was wrong. He shouldn't have done that to you." Or when my dad, silent for weeks, sent me a text that simply said, "You've always been the strong one. I just didn't see it." No apology, but acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. Meanwhile, the Langstons were unraveling. Jasmine's charity initiative was quietly shelved. Rumors started surfacing, nothing scandalous, just the kind of whispers that keep donors from signing checks. William's position on the board became shakier. And Jasmine, she found herself on the outside of the very circles she'd tried to climb into. Not because of me directly, but because she forgot something important. When you treat people like they don't belong, sometimes they buy the whole building. And now it was time to collect. It took exactly 93 days from the night of the wedding reception to the moment I got the call I'd been waiting for. I was in my office, sipping an espresso from the same machine Jasmine had once mocked me for. "You still drink that stuff from a capsule?" She'd laughed at a brunch once, waving her manicured hand like she was allergic to budget appliances. I didn't reply then. But that morning, I smiled as the bitter scent filled the room. The call came from Varello's vice president of finance. His tone was professional but strained, like a man trying to deliver bad news wrapped in legalese. "Craig," he said, "we've had another round of board restructuring requests from Mr. Langston. There's some pushback." I already knew. I'd arranged the pushback. "I understand," I said mildly. "What's the situation?" "Well," he paused. "Given the lack of confidence from the shareholders, the compliance issues under audit, and recent financial turbulence, there's movement for a leadership transition." There it was. The bloodless coup. "What are the board's expectations?" I asked, knowing full well what the answer would be. "They'd like you to step in as interim chairman." I leaned back in my chair. "Let that settle in." "I accept." What followed in the next 2 weeks was methodical and surgical. A series of memos drafted by the legal team. Internal communications drafted with neutral language, strategic realignment, leadership optimization, temporary restructure pending board review. William Langston was removed from day-to-day operations. His access to key financials suspended pending audit. His executive assistant reassigned. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a headline. Just a quiet dissent. The kind reserved for men who overplayed their hand and underestimated the quiet players. And Jasmine? Well, let's talk about Jasmine. She didn't notice the shift at first. But then the invitations started drying up. Her gala appearances were quietly unlisted. Magazine features that had once spotlighted her visionary, charity work now moved on to newer names. Her PR team stopped returning calls. And donors who once wrote six-figure checks began ghosting her events, citing conflicts. The real blow came when Varello announced the dissolution of the Langston Initiative for Global Luxury Philanthropy. That vanity project of hers that had been set to launch with a 5-star gala in Milan? Gone. I didn't even have to lift a pen for that part. The finance committee axed it themselves under the new efficiency directive. She tried to save it. Publicly posted on social media about how heartbroken she was, how unforeseen internal changes had delayed the vision. The post was full of glowing words and filtered selfies from the Tuscany trip she took with Matt. I noticed the comments dwindled. The likes were slower. And then, quietly, the post vanished. I didn't need to see it go viral. I just needed her to know it failed. And I needed her to ask herself why. Matt reached out, finally, about 2 months into my new role. He sent a message first. Not a call. Not even a real apology. Hey, I know things have been tense. Any chance we can grab coffee? I stared at the screen for a while. Then, curiosity winning out, I agreed. We met at a neutral cafe downtown. Quiet. No cameras. No family. He looked worn. Not in a dramatic way, but subtly. Like someone whose world had shifted just slightly off axis. The confident grin he used to wear now came with an edge of self-awareness. A little too practiced. A little too forced. Craig, he said, pulling me into a hug I didn't return. Man, it's been a ride, huh? Something like that. We sat. He didn't order anything. He jumped right in. Look, I've been thinking about everything that went down. And I just wanted to say, I didn't handle things the best way. That's an understatement, I said. He swallowed. Yeah, fair. You didn't just exclude me, I continued. You disrespected me. You stood by while your wife made me feel like a footnote in our own family. I didn't know. You knew. I cut him off. Calm, but firm. You just didn't care enough to do anything. He went quiet. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I didn't realize how far you'd come. What you built. I thought you were just still doing your finance thing. Low-key. That's the thing, Matt. You never asked. You never cared. He looked away. Jasmine said you made her uncomfortable. That you didn't fit the look she was going for. I laughed. And you agreed. He didn't deny it. Look, he said finally. I know things are complicated between us. But we're still brothers. Are we? That landed. He looked down, tapping his fingers against the table. Can we fix it? I took a breath. Not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted to make the silence mean something. I don't know, I said honestly. Trust isn't a light switch. And I'm not going to pretend this didn't change things. But, he asked, hopeful. But I'm open, I said. To something new. Maybe. He nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. He stood. Thanks for meeting me. I stood too. Matt. Yeah. If you ever marry someone again, make sure you don't disappear in the process. He gave a small, sad smile. Noted. As for Jasmine, we never spoke again. I saw her once more, though. It was at an industry event I hosted as part of Varello's new direction, focused on sustainable luxury and authentic branding. A quiet, tasteful affair. No flash. Just substance. She showed up with her father, clinging to the edge of the crowd like someone trying to reclaim space she no longer owned. She didn't come over. But she watched me. And for once, I let her. Because this time, I wasn't invisible. This time, I stood exactly where I was meant to be. At the center. Calm. Confident. Unapologetic. And as the night wound down, as I stepped up to give closing remarks and saw my parents in the audience, Mom beaming, Dad clapping, Aunt Marlene giving me that same proud nod, I realized something. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't petty. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about reclaiming your story. Quietly. Strategically. With grace. And making sure that the next time someone tries to erase you from the picture, you own the camera. They told me I didn't belong in the photo, so I bought the frame, the gallery, and the building it hangs in.